Looks good.
We're in for a treat. A taste test from an award-winning chef.
Robert, this looks so good. Anything added to it, or it's just...
This is as basic as it's gonna come, please.
I'm gonna go for it.
On tonight's menu, shrimp. No sauce, no strong spices. Chef Robert Clark says his shrimp don't need anything. They're different.
So what's your secret? How do you get shrimp to be so much better than I'm used to?
The secret of my success is basically sourcing quality. The more you can maintain the integrity of the product, the easier it is.
Chef Clark believes it's tough to buy quality shrimp at the supermarket.
I have not eaten a farm tiger prawn imported into Canada in probably 20 years. They could be filled with pesticides, antibiotics, insecticides. They're grown in cesspools.
Cesspools filled with antibiotics? Time for a marketplace test to find out what's really lurking on our shrimp.
Fishmonger.
And here's what you might not know. Unlike chicken and beef, in Canada, antibiotic use is banned on all shrimp.
This one is from India.
But most of our shrimp is imported, largely from Asia.
So I've got some from Vietnam, some from Thailand, some from China.
So we buy 51 packages from Montreal, Toronto, Saskatoon, and Calgary.
Let's get an organic one.
We even pick up a few organic samples from Ecuador and from Vietnam. On one of the labels,
Raised without the need for antibiotics.
Uncooked Pacific white shrimp.
Uncooked Pacific white shrimp
Deveined.
from India, deveined.
then we pack them on ice
And we are good to go.
and ship them off to a special lab at the University of Saskatchewan. It's run by microbiologist Joseph Rubin. He's testing to see if there are dangerous bacteria on our shrimp.
Joe?
Hi,
Hey, what do you got here?
I have some of your results from the shrimp.
So these are our shrimp here, or at least bits of them.
Yes, the organisms we grew.
And what are you looking for?
What we're looking for are different types of antibiotic-resistant bacteria and different types of foodborne pathogens.
Pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, Staphylococcus aureus, potentially harmful bacteria that can adapt into superbugs that many antibiotics cannot kill.
What's this one here?
What you can see is we have these nice pink colonies,
Yep.
which is very characteristic of E. coli. In addition to showing us that we have E. coli, also contains antibiotics in it. And so we think that based on growth on this plate, we have an antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
First result, and it's positive for E. coli. But Rubin still needs to run a DNA test overnight to see if the bacteria is antibiotic resistant. The possibility is a big concern. He tells us about recent research from the UK.
They did a large study, and we're projecting forward to 2050 that the number of people who would be dying of resistant organisms could potentially even surpass cancer.
They're already killing people. The superbugs can travel from farm to store to your kitchen,
I don't know where my place is in this world anymore.
but especially in hospitals.
That's my husband.
It looks like you had the camera ready at the
Yeah,
exact moments, yeah.
So, here's beautiful eyes.
2 years ago, Wendy Gould's husband George was diagnosed with colon cancer.
Did you think he was going to live at that point?
If I had anything to do with it, yes.
You were going to try to keep him alive as long as you could.
Everything in my power.
But Wendy ran into a problem that left her powerless. George developed a serious infection.
They had him on antibiotics trying to kill this infection.
Yeah.
Why weren't they working?
Well, it would clear up, but it's still in there. It didn't kill it. It cleared up the infection, but the bug's still waiting.
What was the nature of this bug that meant the antibiotics weren't working
Well,
on
it's a
it?
superbug.
They found out in a letter from the hospital telling them about a contaminated endoscope that was used on George.
We're writing to inform you that you are one of 3 patients who have been identified as having been infected with the bacterium that is called New Delhi metallo I don't know how to say that.
But the E. coli.
Yeah, E. coli.
How does a New Delhi strain of a bug end up
Yeah,
inside George?
from the endoscope.
Doctors tried to kill that bug using half a dozen different antibiotics, some so powerful Wendy says George was violently hallucinating.
This is July 28th, 2016, so it was about a week after his surgery.
He was hospitalized 23 times in just over a year. George became too weak to continue cancer treatment, too sick from the bacteria to eat.
And there he is, January 2018. And that was, he passed away on January 25th. This is what the bug did to him. Then everything fell apart.
Do you think he could have survived?
Yeah. Maybe he wouldn't have been here, for years and years, but it certainly would have been longer than 2 years and he wouldn't have had to suffer.
What is the thing that's important for people to know?
You could have all the best doctors in the world taking care of you with whatever it is that's the matter with you, but if you get one of these infections, that's it.
I'm terrified by this stuff. Multi-drug resistance is probably the biggest threat that we have to modern medicine in the 21st century.
Biochemist Jerry Wright is the director of McMaster University's Institute for Infectious Disease Research.
So this is your lab?
This is where most of my students and staff work. What we're trying to do is find new antibiotics and learn more about antibiotic resistance. Every time you have a knee replacement, any kind of surgery, cancer chemotherapy, if you have anyone in your extended family that's had a premature baby, they all rely on antibiotics because their immune systems are weak.
And what happens if we can't use them, if we've sort of run out of antibiotics because everything's resistant?
All of what we consider to be modern medicine becomes incredibly risky.
One contributor to the crisis, overuse of drugs in our food at home and abroad. And when it comes to shrimp farmed overseas, they're often crammed into disease-prone pools. As a result, antibiotics are sometimes added to keep the shrimp alive, contaminating our food.
Canada is passing laws that say no antibiotics in much of our food, like just banning it. Doesn't that help?
Our supermarkets are full of food that come not just from Canada, but come from all around the world. And the challenge that we have to deal with now is that those countries don't have the same regulations that we do.
So that sounds a bit like a back door.
That's correct. That's the challenge that we have.
That back door means whatever Canada says about banning antibiotics in shrimp, superbugs are still getting into the country.
Once these organisms are here, once these genes are in Canada, then there's no good way to keep them from spreading around. So what would be a really good idea is to prevent them from getting in the first place.
Yeah.
Cross-country shrimp shopping spree. Our mission, testing for superbugs on shrimp. 51 packages shipped to Joe Rubin's lab. The first results show a troubling bacteria. Now we want to know if it's also antibiotic resistant.
So this is the final confirmation?
This is the final confirmation.
Okay.
So what we're going to see here is whether or not we've been able to identify the actual resistance genes. And here you can see, there's our bands. There's proof positive. These are ESBL producing strains. And what an ESBL is an enzyme that bacteria produce that allows them to break down antibiotics.
ESBL is almost like an antibiotic killer?
That's not a bad way of thinking about it. Yeah, it's a bacterial countermeasure.
Overall, Reuben finds 17%. Nearly 2 out of every 10 packages of the shrimp we test are contaminated with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Of those, most are resistant to more than one antibiotic. And of them, 33% test positive for ESBL, the antibiotic killer.
ESBLs are really effective at degrading penicillin-type drugs.
So what about the organic samples? Turns out Reuben finds an ESBL superbug on one of those brands too. We also had shrimp samples that had this label on them, Best Aquaculture Practices. Did any of those turn up positive for antibiotic resistance?
Yeah, so of the 9 samples that we tested where we identified resistant bacteria, 6 of those were from products that had that indication of certification on them.
BAP says to be certified, farmers should only use antibiotics minimally. As a shopper, we asked Reuben what he thinks certified means.
A product that has maybe higher quality than other products. Now, whether that's true or not, and what the particular certification is actually aiming to certify is maybe an open-ended question.
We are the one-stop shop for aquaculture certification.
We share our findings with BAP. They agree that antibiotic resistance is a worldwide problem, but emphasize their shrimp isn't unsafe. Still, their certification doesn't guarantee it wasn't treated with antibiotics. Many unanswered questions, including why one country has more positives for resistant bacteria than any other. Of the 9 contaminated samples, China accounts for 2, Vietnam and Thailand 1 each, and India 5.
Does it prompt questions for you that 5 of the 9 contaminated samples came from India?
Absolutely. Yep, I would be really interested to know sort of where there may have been breakdowns in the production cycle that would have allowed this contamination to occur.
Most shrimp in Canadian supermarkets come from India, 15 million kilograms a year. India also uses more antibiotics than any other country, doubling their use in less than 20 years.
How do these bacteria that we found in the shrimp become resistant to antibiotics?
There's always a low level of resistance, but the kinds of resistance that were detected is really connected in a very straight line towards with antibiotic use.
So it's pretty clear to you that someone has used antibiotics on these shrimp?
Or in the ponds at some point for other organisms or something. There's got to be a way for those resistance genes to be there.
Now, we can't say for sure the shrimp in our test were farmed in antibiotic-contaminated pools. When we share the results with the companies, including the organic brand, they tell us those superbugs may have been picked up during processing, shipping, or elsewhere in the environment. How safe is your shrimp on your marketplace? Our tests have found antibiotic-resistant bacteria on supermarket shrimp, imported from around the world.
Pandora's box is open when it comes to resistance. We can't scrub the planet of this problem.
Companies and certifiers say these superbugs can be killed by cooking your shrimp thoroughly. Easy, right? Well, we're putting that to the test. Researchers at the University of British Columbia coat shrimp with an opaque gel and then invite home cook Charlotte Lee to prepare a dish.
So over here we have the shrimp for you, we have all your ingredients.
She has no idea what she's getting into. The gel will stick to everything she touches, a way to illustrate how easily bacteria on the shrimp could spread. She's very careful in her preparation, constantly wiping her hands and her cooking area.
Hi, Charlotte, I'm David.
Hi, David.
That was really quite something. What is
Thank
this?
you. This is scrambled egg with shrimps.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think the way to make it is to make the egg really creamy and silky. Yeah.
So one of the things that we're doing in our little experiment here that we didn't tell you about before is that the raw shrimp is actually coated in a luminescent gel.
Okay.
And we just want to see sort of where it ended up. We're going to turn all these lights off
Sure.
and give it a go. Okay. Yeah, you see there's some on the counter, there's more on the counter.
Gel from the shrimp on the cornstarch box. On the egg carton. Even on the tap where Charlotte washed her hands. And remember that handshake when I introduced myself? Watching with us, food safety scientist Xian Wang.
So we've just done this experiment. You've seen the results. Does that surprise you at all?
Well, it didn't surprise me. The lady who was doing the cooking, she actually handled things really well. But as a result, we're still seeing the dye. Well, in reality, it could be harmful bacteria being spreaded to the utensils, to other parts of the kitchen.
If this were bacteria, it could live on this surface for months.
The thing is, they're capable of just staying there. And once there's a better condition, they might be able to grow again. So this is pretty alarming.
It's a good reminder for us that even if we cook meat, shrimp really, really well, that there's still a way for bad stuff on it to get into us.
We actually saw, for example, the dye ended up getting onto the green onion.
Yeah.
So if the different ingredients are mixed up, then there's a chance that these harmful bacteria can still get to people through other means.
Make a salad from that green onion, and you're potentially eating live antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And that can now sit in your gut, building up resistance for years to come.
So who's making sure that doesn't happen, that our food is safe? Well, that is the job of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
But we tried for weeks to get an on-camera interview. No luck. So we're here in Quebec City to ask their minister, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, about why CFIA isn't testing for antibiotic-resistant bacteria on imported shrimp.
They're only testing for traces of antibiotic residue, and that is supposedly going to prove whether antibiotics were ever used on the shrimp. If they find it, the CFIA can send that shipment back.
But that test provides no clues about what kind of superbugs are coming into the country.
Should the CFIA be doing the test we did, testing for antibiotic-resistant bacteria?
It's a gap. They need to close the gap. We need to get on top of it. Problem right now is that other than your little study, we don't know.
So we should be watching for it.
We should definitely be watching for this.
So we're going to try to ask the Minister of Health right here why no one seems to be watching.
David with
Hi, David.
CBC Marketplace.
Nice to meet you.
I'm trying to understand whether your government is concerned about antibiotic-resistant bacteria showing up on our shrimp.
Well, they absolutely need to be watching it on our shrimp, and I'm convinced that the CFIA is doing that work that is needed to be done in order to protect our food supply here in Canada.
If they aren't doing it, should they be doing it now?
This is absolutely an area that's a priority for our government.
Is it your commitment to look into the issue of what is on our shrimp being imported into this country?
I am absolutely committed to make sure that I get in touch with our CFIA officials to find out exactly what is being done in this area, and then from there making sure that we ensure that Canada's food supply is safe for all Canadians.
We'll follow up with that. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
While we wait for our government to act, others are already finding solutions.
So these are all the tanks.
This is the farm.
We're visiting a Canadian shrimp farm, Berzan Shrimp, in Langley, BC.
It's huge.
There's a lot to take in.
Like if we look up here, through all of this, how many shrimp live here?
At peak, there's going to be about 3 to 4 million shrimp in this building.
3 to 4 million shrimp in all of these?
Yes.
And it's just an early start. If things go well, they're hoping to boost production and become a major supplier to the Canadian market.
You don't use antibiotics?
There's no antibiotic use in this farm.
Why is it that abroad we see antibiotic use en masse and you've got zip in this huge facility?
We're an indoor facility. We control the engineered air, engineered water.
Keep the water clean, the shrimp stay healthy, so there's no need for antibiotics. We even checked, running our test on Berzan shrimp. No antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Overall, their approach seems to be working.
You want to go fishing? Or I guess shrimping?
Shrimping.
Oh, yeah. So how old are these?
These guys are batch 12, so they've been on the farm here now for a couple of months.
With Chef Robert, we taste test that Canadian shrimp. Delicious, though a bit pricey, about 30% more expensive. But this top cook says cleanliness has a cost.
Food shouldn't be cheap. Our priorities in North America, our priorities are wrong. It's more important to us that we have the right car than we feed the right food to our children. That's where our society is.
Do you think our demand for food at the lowest possible price has somehow caused us to live in the world that we now live in?
Absolutely. You get what you pay for.
Yeah. Do you eat shrimp?
Yes, I do. I love shrimp.
And when you think about what we're finding in imported shrimp, what does it cause you to do?
So I'm very careful when I'm cooking shrimp. For the same reasons I'm careful when I'm cooking chicken. I just assume that there is going to be bacterial contamination on it.
What you need to know. Look for wild shrimp. Always cook shrimp carefully and thoroughly. Buy local shrimp whenever possible. Buying organic is no guarantee the shrimp are free of antibiotic-resistant bacteria.